Welcome, everyone. This is the Working Group on Gender Equality's panel on gender equality in management, education, and beyond. And the goal of this is really to have a bit of a roundtable with some really interesting people to talk about innovative perspectives and approaches. And we're really trying to look at some of the challenges that are ongoing, best practices, and really stimulate discussion on how to expand the ways in which gender equality and sustainability are conceptualized in management education. Just a little bit of an introduction to the Prime Gender Equality Working Group. We were launched in 2012 to support the activities of Prime signatories to try to integrate gender equality into management education. We were also formed to support the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, which were launched in 2010. And really the idea was to try to work with management institutions and faculty members around the globe who are signatories to Prime to try and encourage integration of gender equality issues in the curriculum, in the administration, in all of the different activities in management education. The goals of the Gender Equality Working Group are to develop an interdisciplinary network of academics, employers, and other stakeholders who are interested in integrating gender issues into business school curricula, research, and other areas where management education takes place. We include faculty in the arts and sciences, anthropologists, business historians, as well as traditional business disciplines. We work on gathering information. We're a repository of resources. We advocate for new research. And we really look at other Prime working groups to see what we can do together in terms of really working towards more sustainable management education. So I'd really encourage you to look at our website, which is hosted on the Prime website under working groups, to keep in touch. We have a LinkedIn group. You can email me. And, it'd be great to have you as part of our network, and we've still got a lot of work to do, but I'm going to start the panel and hopefully you'll find some interesting things here. Thank you for being part of our conversation. So I have with me here Jorge Arewello from William Paterson University, Wendy Hine in University of London, and Banu Okazang-Pan from Brown University in the US. And you'll see their bios. My name is Maureen Kilgour, and I'm the chair of the Prime Gender Equality Working Group, and I'm from University of Winnipeg in Canada. So I'll start out with just some general comments about the state of gender equality in management education, and then pass it on to my colleagues for some interrogation of some of these concepts. So just to start off with saying the goal of gender equality is central to any concept of sustainability and to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. It was designated as a standalone goal, SDG 5, and as a goal that cuts across all of the other goals, meaning they must be viewed from a gender-aware perspective. Management education institutions have a role to play in this persistent problem. Despite calls for action from the 1960s, the 1970s, progress has been very slow. So one of the first steps in addressing this lack of attention to gender equality is to understand that there's still a problem, but that it can be fixed. And this problem of gender inequality exists in all areas of management education. Student experiences, curriculum, job placement, the chilly climate for faculty members, harassment, pay discrimination, research issues, career opportunities, leadership, the penalty for motherhood, etc. So a broad perspective on this problem would draw attention to pedagogy, organizational cultures, and how management education is conceptualized and practiced. And we need to understand that a limited understanding of what gender equality means leads to a limited range of remedies, both in management practice and in management education. So really what we're calling for is a challenge to the status quo. And I just want to talk about a couple of themes that appear in relation to gender equality in management education. And they're kind of the things that, we're doing these, so doesn't that mean we're doing a lot? We hope that we recognize these when they appear as the proxies for real action on gender equality, even among those 800 plus business schools and management education institutions that have committed to gender equality through their commitment to Prime. The first one is diversity. It often appears a business school is addressing gender equality through the offering of gender diversity management courses. of diversity management courses, which are usually optional and are sometimes the only area where gender as an analytical category is discussed. A singular focus on diversity management can draw attention away from gender inequalities and the disadvantage faced by women as a group in all societies, and it tends to obscure those root causes of discrimination. Another theme we see as a proxy for action is action on women on corporate boards. So while the lack of women's representation on corporate boards is absolutely worthy of attention and intervention, action in this area is not a substitute for significant attention to other forms of gender inequality. Some UK authors have observed that, quote, in the UK, the neoliberal feminist topic du jour, women on boards, has reached saturation point in the media, whilst all other feminist issues remain stubbornly ignored. Unconscious bias. It's a current preoccupation in academic settings and tends to get more attention than those other concepts like inequality and discrimination. And critics of this concept warn against seeing unconscious bias training as a quick fix, which does little to address the structural roots of gender and other disadvantage in organizations. So these are just 3 examples of gender equality initiatives which are in themselves important, but which represent only the tip of the iceberg of what needs to be done to ensure gender equality is being addressed in management education. There's 2 other phenomena that impede gender equality progress. The first one is appearing to be gender neutral while actually ignoring the reality of gender, not mentioning gender inequality, or the failure to use a gender-aware lens on a particular issue. And one place we see this is in teaching materials where gender is often not mentioned. Now, if gender is not being mentioned or considered in management education on sustainability, supply chain management, leadership, etc., it's possible that many of the structural and theoretical elements of the particular issue are being neglected. The second impediment to progress is the view that gender inequality has been solved, that it's a problem of the past, a post-feminist view. Researchers have found that many business students believe that gender inequality was indeed a problem of the past and doesn't concern them. And we know it obviously hasn't been solved. So what we do know is that systemic problems require systemic remedies. What might some of those look like for management education? I think management education should explicitly adopt the SDG approach to gender equality, which says gender equality is a standalone objective, but it also means it's cross-cutting, that every aspect of management education should consider gender as an important variable. We need to pay attention to inequality regimes. Those are those practices and processes within organizations that cause and maintain inequalities within organizations. Other systemic remedies may include paying attention to power and facilitating the transfer of power that is required by such concepts as women's empowerment, exploring paradigms beyond the dominant ones. And there's so many more strategies that my colleagues are going to discuss in the context of this panel. So in conclusion, I think it's important to say we observe a gender illiteracy among many graduates of management education. So that's this idea that students are graduating without having a good understanding of how gender operates in the world. One could argue that it's not responsible management education to graduate students who are ill-prepared for the debates and discussions and challenges of the 21st century. A gender-aware approach to education across all disciplines is required in order to prepare students to engage in the real world, to have the knowledge and competencies necessary to meet those challenges, to understand those preoccupations of the international business community, the World Economic Forum, the Gates Foundation, civil society organizations, and really to be agents of change towards a sustainable and ethical future for all. So we have the mandate, we have the tools, we have the knowledge, commitments have been made, and with women and girls making up the vast majority of the more than 1 billion people living in abject poverty with very precarious futures, time is of the essence. So in management education, we have a real challenge ahead of us. Thank you very much. So Banu, let's turn it over to you and see if you can give us some more insights into some of these big questions.
Thank you so much, Kate. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and to speak about gender equality in business schools. I'm Banu Askazang Pan. I'm currently a professor in practice of the School of Engineering at Brown University. I also wear a couple of other hats. I'm the academic director for the Executive MBA at Brown University and the co-editor in chief at Gender Work and Organization. My talk today will focus on three related areas for achieving gender equality and takes a systems perspective. Specifically, I'll address the persistence of gender inequality in business schools by focusing on faculty trends, curriculum, and research. These areas are not only interrelated, but have significant impact on the world of business. This leads me to ask each and every one of us, which ideas are taught by whom, what research is valued, and can our current approaches lead to creating inclusive and sustainable economies that benefit all? Before moving forward with these discussions, I want to make sure that we contextualize today's conversation by defining our terms and understanding the relevance of gender for creating responsible educators, scholars, and leaders. When we often talk about gender equality, it tends to come in a form of women's equality and empowerment. The reality is that gender is a much more complex concept. I'll start by outlining why specificity in our terms and concepts is important when we want to speak about gender equality as part of a larger conversation around responsible management education. Often the category of sex is used to talk about biological differences based on external identification. While for a long time, biological sex was equated with gender, today we know that this is not necessarily true for all individuals. Gender, or gender expression, is a socially constructed set of behaviors, roles, expectations, and identities associated with being a woman, man, girl, boy, or non-binary person. Gender identity refers to one's personal concept of who they are and how they identify. By understanding these differences, talking about and achieving gender equality requires that we move away from binary identifications and definitions and focus only on biological sex, which limits our ability to have a much more nuanced understanding of how expectations, assumptions, behaviors, stereotypes, and identities are relevant for achieving equity. In this regard, gender equality must be understood as the movement to achieve and create equal opportunities, rights, and responsibilities for all genders. While we aspire towards this goal, I'd like to share trends related to three areas which continue to represent hurdles in achieving equity. As these facts and figures indicate, faculty trends show that gender equality is still a work in progress. While data is generally still being gathered in a mostly binary fashion, male versus female, the existing data shows that women are underrepresented in leadership positions in business schools, earn an average of 12% less than their male counterparts across rank, and face a funneling as they move towards full professorship. A facet of responsible management education must deal with a stark underrepresentation of women in academic and leadership roles, particularly as these positions are key to resource allocation, decision-making, and role modeling. The question that we should be asking ourselves is, why are men being hired, promoted, and paid higher than women for the same degrees and at the same ranks? Without transparency and accountability, these trends will likely remain. Next, I'd like to emphasize the relevance of curriculum development and design for gender equality, specifically, and responsible management education broadly. With the advent of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, corporations have become much more cognizant of the role they play in addressing gender and race inequities. And yet, business schools are not providing the next generation of leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs the tools they need to succeed in a world where demographics and social values are rapidly changing. Organizations are being held accountable very publicly for their actions or inactions. Business schools must be able to rise to the challenge and create curriculum that can address these very pressing issues. They must become more welcoming of women and all genders and building classroom and pedagogical experiences that are inclusive. Curriculum must reflect the value and relevance of gender through an intersectional approach by mainstreaming it in strategy, accounting, marketing, finance, entrepreneurship, and management, to name a few disciplines. In other words, the few elective diversity-related courses alone will not suffice to address the needs of the business community moving forward or change the leadership dynamics in the corporate world. Finally, gender equality requires that we interrogate critically the kinds of research questions that are being asked and the kind of scholarship that is being valued in the academic community of business scholars. Explicitly critical and gender-focused research often gets relegated to niche journals, where scholars carrying out such research are warned about their prospects for getting tenure. At the same time, the value of intellectual contributions over teaching and service at research-focused institutions creates occupational hierarchies and segregation, as women are not granted tenure at the same rates as men, or become clustered in non-tenure track or teaching positions. The gendered labor of academic work, where women provide the majority of pastoral care, emotional labor, and community work on campus, allows men to engage in higher status work, such as research. Ironically, even parental leave can be used by men to advance their careers by increasing their publications without teaching or service obligations, while women use the time to engage in traditional child rearing. These differences around research productivity then impact tenure and promotion decisions. In all, gender equality requires that multiple and related areas in business schools change simultaneously. It is the work and responsibility of everyone, and it will help ensure that future leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs are creating inclusive workplaces and businesses for all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Banu. That was so interesting, and I really like the way you sort of framed the issues and just kind of showed us kind of the data to sort of support some of those claims. So kind of, again, setting out some of the big picture issues. And so we're going to turn it over to Wendy, who works in the area of marketing, and she's going to give us sort of maybe a bit of a disciplinary perspective. After that, Jorge is going to talk a little bit about challenges and some of the techniques he's found to be quite successful. So Wendy, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hi, hello, and thank you, Maureen, and thank you everybody for inviting me to participate at this panel. I really appreciate it, and I'm really grateful that we can add our voices to this particularly disciplinary debate. Me coming from marketing, and yeah. To introduce myself, my name is Wendy Hine. I'm a senior lecturer in marketing at Birkbeck, University of London. I'm also coordinator of marketing as a subject discipline at the Gender Equality Working Group at Prime. I am also a founding and advisory board member of GenMac, which is a case that I'm going to be talking about today more specifically. And to see a little bit of an insight as to what gender equality means in marketing, well, we need to first of all understand what marketing is in essence as a business function, as a managerial function, and then also understand a little bit more what it is in terms of the academy. So marketing arguably is fundamentally based on differences and divisions, and is actually, you know, one of the main facilities of creating those differences and divisions, and not only that, but thriving of them. So gender is rife within marketing, and the amount of overlap between marketing and consumption and markets to other disciplines is equally immense. So it is really surprising when you see that the amount of research and the kind of research around gender still is on essentializing gender, so categorizing it as men as masculine and women as feminine, and sort of taking this 2x2 matrix to understand significance within the gender differences, rather than engaging with some of the more pressing issues, such as systemic oppressions, systemic discriminations, reproducing of stereotypes, and challenging those, rather than, again, engaging with the same old sort of understandings. We've seen some of this certainly within marketing as business case, so and as businesses, but a lot of it, you could argue, is still not within the interest around gender equality, and also not in the interest of sustainability. So when you think how, you know, sad it is that there isn't a greater interest in with marketing as a business around gender equality, it gets even worse when you look at marketing scholarship on gender. Because in an awful lot of cases, it's either, as we mentioned, gender differences, or it's around gender as a lifestyle, so almost understanding gender as a choice, when clearly that's not the case. So But to give you an example of how void a lot of these discussions are around gender equality within marketing, two of the biggest journals in marketing, as the Journal of Marketing and the Journal of Marketing Research, do not feature any feminist articles whatsoever. So the concept of feminism actually does not even exist within those top journals. And that sort of speaks to what Banu was also talking about, in the sense that a lot of gender scholars who engage with those topics on a critical basis and who would like to challenge the status quo are being pushed onto the margins. So to some degree, we exist within the shadows of this sort of mainstream research that reproduces stereotypes, that reproduces those essentializations around gender as to women are from Venus and men are from Mars. That said, there is a group of scholars and there is a community that has engaged with those topics much more critically, and they have met since the 1990s regularly every 2 years for the Gender Conference, which was the Association of Consumer Research Gender Marketing and Consumer Behavior Conference, and it continued until this day on a relatively informal basis. But considering, again, a lot of the movements that we have seen in recent years, considering the importance to link and to address the issues around gender equality as it links to sustainability, and also, of course, on the back of Prime, we felt it was extremely important to formalize that community and to build greater initiatives to collectively gather our strength on the grassroots level and build up some of the potential positions to give others a shoe in and a step in to research those and build a career on it as well, so that not just exist, but to actually start our own conversations. So we are therefore a relatively new formalized advocacy and academic group, and we seek to change the understanding of gender research and, most importantly, also the teaching of gender in the wider marketing discipline. And it also involves often protecting us and others from potential harm that we sadly have learned that comes with the territory of addressing gender inequalities. So several of our members have experienced personal threats and confrontations by members of the public, colleagues, and at times also vocal oppositions from students, sadly. And one member of our community was severely harassed and via email, and sent various different email threats, which we even forwarded onto the police. So that we all felt we all had to come together as a community, and we co-wrote a bullying and harassment statement to create a protective ring fence around us and everybody who works in this particular area of research in this particular subject discipline. So it's a shame that we have to do this, but it highlights the wide knowledge and privilege and power gap between scholars within our disciplines, and therefore we as a community are now looking to actively challenge this, and are reaching out to like-minded communities, scholarly communities, activist communities, to work with us, and also for individuals and groups across backgrounds to come and join us and to give us a space where we don't just have to exist, but we can actually build a research that can challenge that status quo and can change and turn things around.
Thank you very much, Wendy. That was super interesting and also a little bit sobering, and giving us really concrete examples of where we think gender equality has been done in management education, and it's 2021 right now. And those are pretty serious problems that you're dealing with in your own discipline. So let's go to Jorge, and he's had some success in trying to get gender addressed in his business school and within his courses. So we're going to pass it over to him and hopefully end on a bit of a positive note after the sobering facts from the marketing discipline. Jorge.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Banu, for this introduction of these terms. I think this is very critical and important. So you have made my job a lot easier. I don't have to provide these for us. So I am Jorge Arewello. I am a professor of management coming to you from William Patterson University in the US. It's a very quick agenda that I have for you. First and foremost, I also wanted to thank Maureen and the PRME working group for putting this together. This is really a critical conversation and discussion that we need to have. This is mainly because about 5 years ago, as a business professor, not having any background in feminism or feminist organization studies, my students wanted to have a gender debate in my classrooms, and I felt challenged. And so I'm very happy to report to you that through the group, I came across resources. I also came across the literature, which we termed here niche literature. And unfortunately, that is also the case for sustainability in management education programs. I'm also going to highlight a little bit about my recent contribution to the field, and specifically a model that I developed for integration for both faculty and students. And then I am going to share with you 3 very fun examples of integration as to how I overcame the issue and my students have seemed to enjoy. I will start out by challenges. About 5 years back, as I said, in my diversity classes, which we probably give about 2 weeks time in my sustainability classes, I was asked by students to open up the discussion about women's issues and gender debates and inequality. And I'm really embarrassed to say back then, I did not know how to conceptualize this. And this is the role and the situation for many of the business faculty. We have a very jam-packed curriculum. And so if there's something that we are not familiar with, we will probably leave it to the side. In my case, I have a background and I have been leading the conversation in what we term SIME, Sustainability and Management Education, but I did not have a background in feminism or gender studies. So I was lacking in that respect. And as you heard from Wendy and Banu, my second and third challenges also had to do with the organizational context and the academic status that gender studies has within universities, including mine, and really the overwhelming lack of gender knowledge amongst universities. And as we are making the point today with our 2 panelists who spoke before me, this translates and spills over to organizational culture. If we don't offer these debates critically at the business education level and within our programs, then this discussion is going to be very weak when our students get to work. So what I did is I did reach out to the PRME working group on gender and equality about 5 years back. I was right away pointed to edited books, special issues, which really touched on the gender education and management programs. But my take on this was that I was really introducing these topics in my sustainability-led programs. So I opted out and I said, let me take all of these great tools from this group, put them together and come up with an article where I can touch on these challenges so that I can have a voice for those faculty who felt the same as I did. And then I continued forward. So yes, just like we heard today from Banu, I provide definitions, we have literatures, I make an intersection between SIME and feminist organization study perspectives. And in essence, I provide a theoretical framework so that we can allow faculty to have a relaxing conversation on gender studies in our courses. So I'm gonna right away tell you 3 of the most fun things that I did, which I couldn't believe that I overcame. One of the first ones was that I could then say to my students, today, we are going to have a fun conversation and we are going to allow you to share what you believe gender means to you at the individual level. And my students' reactions immediately is, oh, great, we're not talking about anything else. We're going to talk about something that is really relevant. So I would say, do not be afraid. The students are going to welcome the conversation. So what we do is we ask everyone to share their definitions. We write them on the board. And then through the perspectives that I offer in my article, and obviously through the resources that we have in the PRME working group, you can actually tell the students, there is already a lot that you know about feminism. And perhaps this was a discussion when we were talking about radical feminism or psychoanalytic approaches. And so we begin to build a foundation of discussion about feminist organization theory right in a sustainability class. Another fun thing that we do are role plays. These are really instrumental and they're also very educational. And they're very appropriate towards the end of a term where we have already discussed and told a little bit about gender. So we bring a process to reality. And so everyone in the classroom, including the faculty member, becomes actors in a main scene. And don't be afraid. Many of the students, you simply ask, has anyone ever experienced a gender inequality situation at work? And a dozen hands will come up. And then you just play out the scene. Another fun tool that I have used which really isn't a lot of fun, but more critical, is the case study analysis approach. Through the working group, I was introduced to the 2012 Bangladesh Tasmeen factory fires, which offers really critical managerial implications of this type of tragedy that takes place. And in specific, there were 112 deaths. The majority of them were poor working women. So our students are engaged in a broader discussion around the true structures of what we mean by global capitalism. And we really begin to hone in on these local manifestations and inequalities in these demographics. So we talk about gender inequality, we talk about social injustice, we talk about the true experiences of women around the globe. We talk about feminization of poverty through hunger. We talk about the burden of unpaid work. We talk about adverse health conditions and situation and impacts on families. We even talk about conflict, violence, and the lack of food insecurity for women and girls around the world. So basically, and as we are discussing today, and we really have a really nice transition between the two speakers and myself today, I think the main objective is to really address this need to identify elements that should be included, not just in diversity courses, but in sustainability enhanced courses, which was my case. And I think through these discussions, we are able to advance this type of understanding of how faculty, in particular my case, we are able to present complex social issues, those that are really prominent, and those that can intersect sustainability, the status of women, gender feminism, and even inequality to business students to truly have a departure. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Jorge. That was sort of interesting just to see how, the things that the three of us talked about, you were able to sort of funnel down and kind of explain how you actually do that in a classroom setting. And I think that's really useful knowledge for all of the people listening today. So that's great. Banu, I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind. That we've kind of done this big survey and really, the challenge, I think, now that we know that gender equality is kind of the goal, and we believe it should happen across the business school. What are some sort of concrete ways that you would suggest that management education institutions can adopt to make sure that it's shared across the whole business school, or in faculty of engineering, faculty of law, other sort of disciplines that deal with management education?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a few things that can be done that are quite concrete, including one, the gathering and sharing of data that's disaggregated by gender and race and other differences. I think that's key. While we have some data, it's not as nuanced as it needs to be. I think there also needs to be a sharing of curriculum and an understanding of where diversity or other gender-related topics are emerging, who's teaching them, and who might presumably need training and education and support so that they feel comfortable, as Jorge was mentioning, to be able to share in this kind of pedagogy. I think it is the responsibility of everyone across all disciplines to train themselves so that they can support their students better. And then lastly, in the area of research, really looking at, when it comes to tenure and promotion, what kind of research is being valued and where are we stymieing particular research areas because we feel that they are somehow not aligned with what's considered mainstream business research and education. I think in those three areas, there could be significant ways in which colleagues and together we can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that sort of goes to what Wendy was saying in terms of the top market or the apparent top marketing journals and not kind of publishing certain types of research. And just a follow up on that, what's the role of leadership in making all of that happen?
I think when we look at the breakdown or sort of the ways in which gender plays a role and who's the dean of a business school, there's still a lot of movement there that we could sort of think about towards equity. So I think leadership makes a big difference. Simply because someone is male does not mean they don't value gender equality. I think that's not true. But I do believe that there needs to be an education at the dean's level. I know they have meetings as deans of business schools, that this could be a front and center agenda related to how they value the kinds of work that their faculty are doing, and offer lines and extensions on tenure related to different ways of encouraging gender equality. So I don't think that the rules that they exist now are doing service to gender equality, but but I do believe leaders have an opportunity to change the rules.
Great. Thank you very much. Wendy, I've got a question for you. It's my favorite time of the session. You've talked about marketing and you've been involved with Prime for, I guess, almost a decade now. So what are your suggestions, recommendations for business schools that sign up to Prime in terms of addressing some of the issues you've raised? Are there lessons for the bigger Prime community in terms of those pretty serious things that are going on in your discipline?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. You can say that again. I think it sort of links on to what Banu was saying in many ways. There are so many different things that can be done, and I think as she mentioned, I think data and transparency is extremely important. But it's also important to not just count women or men, because that to some degree can also link to essentializing that men or women are sort of promoting and progressing gender equality, when often that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So I think the first lesson is that clearly gender, and particularly gender equality and critical perspectives on these issues matter and need to matter an awful lot more than they do right now. Because across disciplines, we see that mainstream research around gender is actually, to some degree, you could almost say, well, in critical terms, symbolically violent, and is actually violating a lot of the principles around gender equality that we are fighting for. And that in itself is a tragedy. And it's just important for institutions to support their staff who may, move into these communities and who are trying to engage in those debates and those conversations and push those agendas further, and to not just sort of tolerate them, but to promote them and to push those forward, to give them visibility, and to actively, promote staff to join and create their own groups like GenMac and engage and reach out to others who are like-minded in this. And I think one of the big lessons is that the status quo, as we have it in right now in a lot of disciplines, is actually against us. It's not working. So it's much more important to build more on the grassroots communities like this, and raise the voices collectively in every way we can to make sure that we don't just exist, but that we are heard and our work towards change is also recognized.
Great. Thank you very much. Jorge, I started off the panel by talking about sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals and goal number 5, and kind of saying how important, that approach was to responsible management education. I wonder if you can talk about, from your perspective, coming to gender equality via sustainability. Can you talk about how we can really bridge that gap between sustainability and management education and gender equality?
Wow. I'm going to have to probably think of one example in our particular case. The colleagues, for example, Mark Starrick and Gordon Rance, Shelley Mitchell and myself, we have been very involved at the Academy of Management, the Organizations and Natural Environment Division, in advancing this SIME, Sustainability in Management Education agenda. And we have started to talk about, obviously, how do we reach this connect that we need between SIME and the SDGs, and more in particular, the gender side of education. And the example that I want to share with you is one which we said, finally, we found one way of advancing this conversation. We put together a research handbook in 2017 about the latest developments in SIME. And while we received approximately 48 chapters for consideration, only one of them came in asking us about this critical aspect that sustainability in management education needed to be linked with gender issues. These are the same arguments that Haynes and Murray, you, Maureen, and our colleagues have argued for a while, that we need to bring more of an aspect of social justice from a gender perspective, because this is really missing in management education, in business education in general, as we talked about today, but more than anything, in the PRME sphere within our own group. I don't know that we're having enough of this conversation. And so what we did in the handbook is we provided the authors with more tools and resources to make that link between what they were studying. In this particular case, they were looking at threshold concepts that students in Britain wanted to engage in the classroom. And so we made that chapter part of the research handbook as the conversation that we were not having enough of in SIME, to make that inclusion and say, we can brag about everything that we have been doing at our business school in regards to sustainability, but the idea is, what have we not been doing enough of? And so in general, I think that one way that we can do this, as both Wendy and Banu and the introduction that you have made, Maureen, is that we really need to situate gender equality and inequality as a key issue, because the social justice aspect of the social pillar of sustainability is asking for this. And the SDGs is just one platform, global platform. So I'm thinking that intergenerational equity between present and future generations and between different groups is the way that we are going to continue. For example, more PhDs should be welcome to work with us on this particular area. More students in the MBA program can do research assistance or help us with our research project. And we really should take them along to the conference and the events that we are attending to have this wider intersection. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. So Banu and Wendy and Jorge, I guess just time for one quick question. Where does the hope lie for change? Because if we look at, the literature going back to when women started becoming faculty members in business schools and students, and then only in the 1960s, basically 1970s, we haven't come a long way, and we're still talking about the same things. So maybe one sentence each. Where does the hope lie for real change? Banu, do you want to start?
I'll start. I'm seeing pressure building from both ends, both from the business community saying, once they get to the organizations, are these folks really trained in the ways that they need to be? But then also from the student side, really wanting to engage in conversations, knowing what they value, really putting the squeeze, I would say, on business schools and faculty in general to change what we're doing in terms of teaching, research, and education.
Yeah, that's great. That pressure to change is hopefully will stimulate change. So Wendy, what do you think? Where's the hope?
Well, I guess the hope is in a lot of the activist work and a lot of again, I think younger scholars who are engaging with a lot of these issues on a completely different level. I think gender equality for many is and maybe should be at a par of sustainability. And I think, there is a debate as to which comes first. Is sustainability creating gender equality, or is gender equality creating sustainability? So I think, if we consider it this way, then any move towards understanding that sustainability is actually a must, then gender equality is a must. And if we are developing curricula that are increasing around sustainability, then that needs to also mean that in the first instance, we all need to learn about gender equality and what it means.
Great, thank you. Jorge, one sentence. Hope, where's the hope?
A couple of sentences. I think Maureen, Banu, and Wendy, remember when we were preparing and getting ourselves ready for this session, and we had a brief discussion on how do we zoom in and not zoom out in what it is that we're doing. I think we need to keep the momentum. The three of us in some way, and the four of us in many ways, are talking about the same challenges. We are talking about integration. We're talking about SDGs. My take on this is that we really need to continue to collaborate and stay in touch and knock on the doors of the individuals that have at some point touched our lives with the research that they have done. Today, we heard from Wendy and these amazing statistics that we have, and perhaps it will be through numbers, through measurement, through metrics. That's what I see. More research on outcomes and more reported quantitative analysis.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'll just end on I think the hope that I see is, in addition to what you've all said, is, this year when I was teaching a social enterprise course and the students had to develop their own social enterprise programs, it was actually really moving the number of student groups that went off and developed social enterprise project ideas that actually address gender inequality in some ways without me prompting them, without them knowing that much about me. And I think, in whether it's teaching business ethics, human resource management, or industrial relations, where students have a thirst for knowledge and they really have a thirst for that social justice that Jorge had mentioned. So I think the hope is with the students also kind of pushing us, like Banu said, that pressure to change from students, from business, and hopefully at some point we will see real change. So Anyways, thank you very much, everyone. It's been wonderful doing this, and I hope the audience has really enjoyed this. And we look forward to hearing from people. The Prime Working Group website is up and running on the Prime main website, so there's contact information there. And it's been great. It's been really a great discussion. So thank you very much, everybody.
Same here. Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
Thank
take
you,
care.
Maureen.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.